Welcome back, casual gardeners. I've learned a few things about lettuce, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I should share some of those things with you before lettuce season begins in earnest. So buckle up and get ready to geek out about this salad staple. This is going to be a very thorough video, so I have made an effort to divide it into chapters by topic. If there's a topic that you're interested in, go ahead and jump to that chapter. But YouTube and I would both really appreciate it if you just sat and watched through the whole video for reasons. Lettuce is a very versatile plant. You can start it indoors or direct sow outside. Germination is reliable and pretty easy. As long as you're not growing iceberg lettuce, it's a great source of vitamins K and A. I think K is really important for bone density. And there are some other nutrients that you can get from lettuce depending on the cultivar. Now, if you've ever allowed lettuce to bolt, you might have noticed a strong resemblance to a North American weed called prickly lettuce. It's actually an invasive plant, so I wasn't correct in calling it North American. If you're in Europe, you probably have prickly lettuce as well. They resemble each other so closely because they're both members of the same genus, Lactica. And genus Lactica is part of the sunflower family, or Asteraceae. Now, their membership in Asteraceae becomes a little bit more obvious after they've bolted because you might have noticed those dandelion-like flowers. And yeah, dandelions are another member of Asteraceae. Lettuce can be started outdoors 2 to 4 weeks before the average last frost for your area, or it can be sown indoors whenever you want, year-round. Lettuce will germinate in temperatures as low as 35 degrees Fahrenheit, so just a little bit above freezing. But you'll get optimal germination between 70 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And of course, as usual, I'm popping up the centigrade units right there. The seeds are pretty cold hardy. So if you accidentally sow your lettuce too early, don't worry, it should still come up. But when the lettuce finally does come up after being sown too early, you might notice that the germination is a little bit uneven. The seeds might come up a little bit staggered. And that's just because you're starting them outside their optimal temperature range. But once they've all come up and caught up, they should still be pretty in step with each other. Now, if you're starting indoors when you're having more optimal temperatures, you'll notice that almost all of your seeds should come up in about 7 to 10 days. It's pretty quick indoors. And you do not want to use a heating mat for lettuce germination. If the temperatures are too high, you're also going to get poor germination, or you may get no germination at all. Some lettuce cultivars need light stimulation to germinate. So if you're sowing outdoors, don't plant any deeper than 1/4 inch to 1/8 inch. So that'd be less than 1/2 centimeter deep, so that it gets that light from the sun to aid in its germination. If you're growing indoors where pests are less likely to come along and try to eat your lettuce seeds, you can plant even shallower. You can scatter the seeds on top of your soil and just pat them down for soil contact, or just dust a fine dusting of potting mix on top and then pat it down for soil contact. And that's it. Now, lettuce at every point in its life loves consistently moist soil. So you're going to want a clear cover on your lettuce before it germinates. Once about half of your lettuce seedlings are up, you can remove your cover. Make sure you are bottom watering your seed trays or soil blocks or whatever to maintain consistently moist soil. It is important to remove that cover once the seedlings are up, because while lettuce isn't as subject to damping off as, say, peppers or tomatoes are, it can still damp off. It's not super important what kind of soil you use to start your lettuce, because it's just not that picky. The lettuce is going to germinate just about anywhere you put it. It is a very weedy plant. It's a delicious weed, but a weed nonetheless. So as long as it's got the right temperature, moisture, and light, it's good to go. Now, in my experience, lettuce transplants quite readily. I don't think I've ever seen a lettuce plant die from transplanting unless I forgot to harden it off first. Even though lettuce is one of the hardier plants that we grow in our gardens, you do still need to harden it off because those leaves that it grows indoors are not adapted to outdoor conditions. They haven't had that full range of temperatures. They haven't had unfiltered sunlight. They haven't had those swings in humidity that happen outdoors but not indoors. Since I have a greenhouse, that's not an issue. I can just move it out to my greenhouse for a while. If you have a cold frame, I've had really great luck just setting my lettuce pots in my cold frame and throwing a shade cloth over it. And I'll prop the cold frame open so that I get some air movement, but not a lot. And it just sits in the cold frame for a week and it's good to go out into the raised beds. So if you don't have a cold frame or a greenhouse, you can do it like a lot of other plants. Just day one, take it outside during a gentler time of day for an hour and bring it back in. Day two, shoot for 2 hours. Day three, shoot for 3 hours. By the time you're at 5 or 6 hours outside, you can just transplant it out and your lettuce should be fine. If you're growing lettuce indoors, there is no need to start it in a starter pot or a soil blocks or starter mix. You can start your lettuce in the container that you intend to harvest your lettuce from. It just makes your life easier. I'll plant 2 or 3 seeds in a hole, and each plant is going to need about a 6-inch diameter pot. So smaller than this, just a little bit. I think these are 8-inch. But you may be able to get away with a smaller pot if you're just really careful about fertilizing and watering your lettuce as it grows. Now inside, your watering schedule is going to change with your humidity levels in your home and the age of your lettuce. Larger plants are going to use more water. If your soil is not noticeably moist, give it more water. And I do always recommend bottom watering inside because that way you're splashing less stuff up onto your leaves that you'll need to clean off later. Lettuce is a really fast grower and a very heavy feeder. So make sure that your starting soil actually does have some nutrients to get it going. You're going to want to start fertilizing maybe as soon as 2 or 3 weeks after germination, depending on how fast your lettuce is growing in your conditions. You will notice that your leaves become a little bit malformed if it runs short on nutrients. That is your key to step up the feeding. I would recommend for indoor growing that you use a liquid fertilizer mixed in with the water you're watering with at the recommended amount by the manufacturer. Just make sure that you're using a heavy nitrogen fertilizer because you are growing foliage and nitrogen is for foliage. Loose leaf lettuce performs way better indoors than heading lettuce will. You can start harvesting it sooner. Also, it gets by with a lot less light. So if you are picking a cultivar to grow inside, go with a loose leaf cultivar. And I've had actually a lot of fun with them. I think that there's more variety in flavors and textures and appearance in loose leaf than you get with heading lettuces. It's my favorite. Some cultivars of loose leaf lettuce can get as few as 4 to 6 hours of sunlight in a day. So 4 hours of sunlight is actually doable growing inside a house, whereas more than 6, maybe not so much. Because your lettuce is spending more of its time at optimal temperatures in your house, you can expect to harvest it a little bit sooner indoors than you would outside most of the time. I will start picking lettuce as soon as 3 or 4 weeks after germination. It's just, boom, we're starting to harvest the lettuce. And how you harvest your lettuce, I will talk about later. But it's pretty easy, so don't sweat it. When you're growing indoors, you might notice some changes in appearance though. Your leaves are going to be paler in general than they would be growing outside, and the leaves are also going to be a lot more tender growing indoors. You may also notice that your red lettuce varieties are maybe not so red growing indoors because it does not need to produce those pigments to protect from excessive light. Most plants, when they're turning red, that is actually dealing with excess light by trying to block some of it. A red lettuce not turning red doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem. It means that it's comfy and doesn't need to grow that extra pigment in its leaves. Now, when you are growing lettuce indoors, if you're growing under lights, it's super important that the lights do not run for more than 12 hours in a day. And you may want to do less time than that, depending on how strong your lights are. If your lights are like mine, I've got a 4-bulb T5 high output shop light fixture. You can probably get away with as few as 6 or 8 hours of light in a day. And the reason you want to reduce your lighting when you're growing under lights is because day length can be a signal for the lettuce plant to bolt. I found that out last time I was growing lettuce indoors. I thought, haha, my temperature is perfect and my moisture is perfect. It will not bolt. And then it bolted sooner than usual because my lights were on for like 14 hours a day. So don't do that. Learn from my mistakes. Whether you're direct sowing or transplanting out, when you're growing outside, because you're not in pots, spacing becomes an issue. You'll notice that loose leaf lettuce requires less space in general than heading lettuce, but the actual space that your lettuce plants will need is going to vary with the cultivar of lettuce. Don't follow my directions, follow the directions on your seed packet. However, with that being said, while heading lettuce, you're going to want to stick to the spacing recommendation on the packet. Loose leaf lettuce can usually be planted a little bit closer, sometimes half as far apart as the packet tells you to. By planting your lettuce plants closer together, you're essentially creating a living mulch in your garden, and you can use that to shade out weeds that would otherwise grow a lot better. I like to plant loose leaf lettuce plants tight at the bases of some other plants that grow taller or have different nutrient needs. So I like to grow lettuce around the bases of my tomato plants. I like to grow them around my cucumber plants and my pea plants. Pea plants are great because while they're producing nitrogen and fixing nitrogen, that nitrogen is feeding your lettuce plants. Meanwhile, your lettuce is reducing weeds around your pea plant. It's a match made in the garden. If you do use loose leaf lettuce as a living mulch in your garden, you are going to want to make sure, and this is really important, that you have a lot of friends or family members who will appreciate you gifting them regularly with your lettuce, because that is the only problem I've had when it comes to using lettuce as a living mulch. There is so much of it. I couldn't give it away as fast as I was harvesting it, and I definitely couldn't eat it as fast as I was harvesting it. It's a nice problem to have. Hashtag first world problems. Lettuce that is grown outdoors is not usually going to need to be fed as often as indoor lettuce because its roots are able to expand out and explore for nutrients. They're not stuck in a pot. I've actually achieved good year-long lettuce growth in a plot with just 2 to 3 inches of compost top dressing, either applied at the beginning of the growing season in the spring or having been applied, and I think this is actually slightly better, the previous fall. And since lettuce is a leaf crop, drip irrigation is super important. This is going to prevent moisture from sitting on your leaves and causing defects in that way. And it's also going to keep from splashing pathogens from the soil up onto your leaves. So if you can drip irrigate your lettuce, please do drip irrigate your lettuce. I personally prefer the brighter colors and crisper texture of lettuce that has been grown outdoors or in a greenhouse. But no matter where you grow your lettuce, I bet you will find that you enjoy it a lot more than the lettuce you've been getting at the grocery store. If you're growing heading lettuce, you're going to allow that to mature, form its nice tight head, and then you're just going to cut that off, and there you go. It's a one-time harvest. Sometimes if you leave the stem and roots intact, you're going to see some offshoots grow off from that stem stub, and you can actually harvest leaves of lettuce off of those offsets for a while before it bolts. So It doesn't have to be a one-time harvest, but you'll only get the one head of lettuce. Alternatively, you can just yank out your plant and throw it in the compost. Only compost healthy plants, please. It is always best to pick your lettuce during the coolest parts of the day. Mornings are ideal. If you can't pick your lettuce in the morning, pick your lettuce in the evening after things have cooled off. Picking your lettuce while it's cool is going to do a couple of things for you. It reduces the amount of wilting. Your lettuce is going to be optimally hydrated. It's going to have its full complement of water in there. So the leaves are going to be crisper and more durable during the harvesting process. Loose leaf lettuce can be picked a lot sooner than heading lettuce because you're not waiting to form that head. You can pick it as soon as you've got like 5 leaves, but I like to wait a little bit longer. Once you've got enough leaves to harvest your loose leaf lettuce, you have options. Option 1 is the cut and come again method. It's a little bit riskier because if you cut a little too low, you can lose some future harvests, but it's also a lot faster. So if you're growing a bunch of lettuce and you just don't have time to do my favorite method, cut and come again is for you. You're going to want to gather up your lettuce leaves, pull them up above the stem, and then cut just above the stem with a sharp implement. Make sure it's nice and sharp. Just through and then throw all your leaves into your harvesting container. The plant is going to continue growing. You should have more leaves to harvest the same way as quickly as a week under optimal conditions. If it's the very beginning of spring and things are still a little bit cool, or it's moving into summer and things are on the hot side of optimal, your plant could be a little bit slower. Option number 2, my favorite, is picking individual leaves. This is a lot more fiddly and time consuming, but I feel like the whole leaves store a little bit better than the shredded leaves from cut and come again. It's the same idea. I pick the outer larger leaves and I will pick all the way in until I've just got like 3 to 5 small leaves at the top of the stem. Just strip that baby. Those go in my harvesting container. In as quickly as a week, once again, you can have more lettuce to harvest. Now, option number 3 is to treat your loose leaf lettuce like a heading lettuce and just let it grow nice and big and full. Just cut the whole thing off at the bottom of the stem. Just like with heading lettuce, you're only going to get the one big harvest out of this, but it's up to you. That option 3 is definitely the lower effort option for harvesting your lettuce, and there's nothing wrong with any of them. Do what suits your needs. Now, even if you are using the most organic and immaculate growing methods and you're reliably and consistently and only drip irrigating, you must wash your lettuce before you eat it. There are animals in the world that fly and crawl and move through our gardens, and gosh, I'm glad they do, but they all poop. Everybody poops. And even if the rain has washed away that poop, the bacteria from the poop can form a residue on our leaves, and some of that bacteria can make us very, very sick. So please, please wash your lettuce after you harvest it before you eat it, no matter how clean it looks. Now, when I wash my lettuce, I like to use a big bucket or a big sink, and I will fill it with water sufficiently that the leaves can swirl around freely in the water. That first washing, I'll let things soak a bit, and a surprising number of organisms are going to crawl up to the surface of your lettuce. I've picked out spiders and earwigs and moths and things that you don't even notice while you're picking them, even if you're picking one leaf at a time. If you're a softie like me, you'll gather up all those critters and throw them outside, or you can squish them. No judgment. I'm going to do at least 3 wash cycles. So I'm going to fill it, I'm going to soak it, I'm going to swish it around, I'm going to drain that water completely. And using a full water vessel like that ensures that you're getting water exposure on all of the surfaces of the leaves. I've tried washing it in a colander with water flowing over the leaves. I don't feel like I'm getting a good enough clean. If you're somebody who feels like you need to use vinegar or a mild detergent, you should use that in your first wash cycle, because nobody wants a soapy salad or soapy leaves in a sandwich. So by adding your vinegar or mild detergent to the first wash cycle when you're washing your lettuce, you've got, 2 more cycles after that to make sure you get a good rinse. And if you are super germ phobic to the point where you gotta sterilize stuff, you can add food safe hydrogen peroxide into your last cycle. Please do not ever bleach your food. Please do not use any sanitizing agent aside from food grade hydrogen peroxide, because I want you to be okay eating that delicious lettuce you've grown. The first year I grew lettuce, I did not have a salad spinner. And so I improvised with a mesh bag, a big mesh bag on the end of a short rope. And I would put all of my lettuce in the mesh bag and just swing it around my head, or like that sometimes. It's wet and it's tiring, but it gets the job done. Now, I store my lettuce wrong. And when I say that, I mean that I can't find anywhere that says this is how you should store your lettuce and it matches what I do. But my lettuce stored wrong lasts about 2 weeks in the refrigerator, and I feel pretty good about that. So I'm going to share my method. Now, keep in mind as I share this that it is wrong. You probably should not do it. But after I spin my lettuce, either manually or in a spinner, I just jam it in a 2-gallon freezer bag and label it and throw it in the fridge. And that's it. It is 2 weeks before anything starts to get slimy most of the time. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that I am harvesting whole leaves and I'm harvesting in the morning when they're optimally crisp and happy. Popular advice is that you're going to pat the leaves as dry as you can with a dish towel and then throw them in the bag with a damp paper towel. The idea of the damp paper towel is that it does contribute humidity to the atmosphere inside your bag without getting your leaves too wet. And some places will actually tell you to store your lettuce unwrapped just directly in your crisper drawer. I think this is primarily heading lettuce advice. My experience is that I tend to harvest more lettuce than my crisper drawer can hold. And so if that's not you, go ahead, do whichever method works best for you. That's always the most important thing. Whatever method you use, plan on keeping your freshly harvested lettuce for at least 7 to 10 days before any problems arise. Now, there are 3 main signals that trigger bolting in lettuce. 2 of those signals are actually under our control. Only 1 of those are out of our control. Agricultural researchers have found that cumulative light exposure, so the total hours of light in the life of a lettuce plant, can contribute to bolting. This is why things went horribly wrong when I grew my lettuce under lights for too much of the day. And it's also part of why lettuce predominantly bolts as the days get longer into the early part of summer. So one way that we can keep our lettuce from bolting is by limiting the cumulative light hours that our lettuce experiences. If you're growing indoors under lights, you have shorter light days because you're on a timer. You can do whatever you want. Or you make sure you're keeping your lettuce in a window that only gets, 5 or 6 hours of sun a day. If you're growing outdoors, you might limit the cumulative light exposure by growing in part shade, or by using a shade cloth, or by growing your lettuce to the north, in the northern hemisphere, of a larger plant that will shade it during the middle part of the day. Another signal to the lettuce plant that it might be time to bolt is that the days get hotter and the soil dries out more. Now, we don't technically have control over how hot the days get, but we can help keep our lettuce cool, again, with shade cloth. And keeping the soil moist has dual action. It will help your lettuce cool off on a hotter day, and it prevents that dryness half of the signal from helping your lettuce decide it's time to bolt. The third thing is that, just like us, your lettuce plants are going to have an internal clock. After a certain point in their life, your lettuce plant's biology is just going to say, all right, I've been around for a while. It's time to move on with my reproductive cycle. It's time to bolt. Even if it doesn't feel right, it's now or never. Let's get to it. So there's no such thing as completely keeping your lettuce from ever bolting, ever. But we can manage factors to prolong the life of our lettuce before it bolts. Now, once our lettuce is bolted, we might just decide to keep that plant around. It's got benefits. Those flowers, those little dandelion-like flowers, are going to attract pollinators to our garden. They look pretty. Plus, big added bonus, if we keep them around a little bit longer, we can harvest some seeds for free. Free seeds! Members of genus Lacticus are mostly self-pollinating. So what that means is that the pollen from the flower is going to pollinate that flower, and you're going to get seeds without interacting with other plants. But pollinators will love to visit your lettuce. And for this reason, it's ideal that you keep your lettuce cultivars separated by a distance of at least 3 meters or 10 feet. So that's just to help reduce the cross-pollination that occurs. Now, additionally, prickly lettuce that is in the same genus as lettuce sativus, which is the lettuce we grow, prickly lettuce will hybridize with our domesticated lettuce. And if that happens, the seedlings are going to sadly more resemble the weedy parent than the domesticated parent. So if you are collecting lettuce seed, it is really important to make sure that you've taken down all of the prickly lettuce that might be growing within 10 or 20 feet of your cultivar that you're harvesting seeds from. And that needs to happen before the flowers set. Professional seed growers are going to be the ones who are spacing their lettuce cultivars by as much as 20 feet or 6 or 7 meters. Now, after pollination, those little dandelion-looking flowers are going to close up, and when they open again, you get your cute little dandelion puffball. You're just going to let those seed puffballs dry out, but not completely. And then what I like to do is I will tip my whole plant stem down into a paper bag, and I'll just break off the stem in the bag, because those seeds detach really readily when they're ready to, and they're just going to blow all over the place. And I'd like to get as many of them in my bag as I can. You can rub the sides of your paper bag together to detach the seeds from the plant, and then you can pull the stems back out and throw them in your compost. Once the seeds are off, that rubbing also helps pull the fluff off of the seeds. Once I've picked the larger debris out of my paper bag, I will, and I've got the seeds pretty clean, I'm going to store that in a paper envelope labeled with the lettuce cultivar and the year that I harvested the seeds. You're going to want to keep your seeds in a cool, dry place, but really importantly, also in a dark place, because remember, those seeds can be activated by sunlight. So this has been a really long video, and if you're still with me, thank you. That means a lot to me. In the off chance that you still have questions about lettuce that I have not answered, please drop them in the comments so that either I or another viewer can get your question answered for you. If you enjoyed my content, please hit the subscribe button, because that will get you notifications that I've made more stuff when I do. I hope to do a whole series about from seed to harvest for all the crops. I'm doing this one early. Most of the series is going to come out next winter, because that's when I'll have most of my footage from seed to harvest. So look forward to that. Thank you for joining me here in my garden, and I hope you have a wonderful time in your own.